Welcome to Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. This is War, Peace, and the Presidency, Breaking with Convention. I'm Amy Goodman. President Biden's tested positive for COVID and canceled a campaign speech Wednesday evening as he headed back to Delaware to self-isolate. The White House says Biden has mild symptoms and is being treated with the antiviral drug Paxlovid. Biden was set to address the Unidos U.S. conference in Las Vegas to appeal to Latinx voters. Earlier in the day, an unmasked Biden was seen greeting supporters with close physical contact. Just hours before news of the president's COVID diagnosis went public, Biden made headlines over comments during an interview with BET journalist Ed Gordon.
Is there anything that you would look to, you personally, not anybody else, not other pundits, not even perhaps family members, that you would look to say, if I see that, I will reevaluate?
If there had some medical condition that emerged, if the doctors came to me and said, you got this problem, that problem.
Later in the same interview, Biden appeared to forget the name of his Secretary of Defense, Lloyd Austin, referring to him as a black man. Separately on Wednesday, California Congress member and U.S. Senate candidate Adam Schiff publicly called on Biden to, quote, pass the torch. After reports he told donors privately Biden could cost Democrats the presidency and the Senate if he stays in the race. This comes amidst reports that top Democrats, former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and party leaders Chuck Schumer and Hakeem Jeffries have directly expressed concerns to President Biden over his ability to beat Donald Trump. Meanwhile, President Biden has been the subject of backlash this week over comments he made in an interview with journalist Speedy Morman on Complex, where Biden claimed he was very supportive of Palestinians.
Are you a Zionist?
Yes. Now you'll be able to make a lot out of it because some people don't know what a Zionist is. Do you know what a Zionist is?
I just ask questions, I don't answer.
By the way, I'm the guy that did more for the Palestinian community than anybody. I'm the guy that opened up all the assets. I'm the guy that made sure that I got the Egyptians to open the border to let good goods through, medicine and food and.
President Biden's comments come as Israel's U.S.-backed war on Gaza has now killed nearly 39,000 Palestinians, though the true death toll is certainly much higher. Among those killed was Mohammed Bahar, a 24-year-old man from Gaza City. Bahar's mother says her son, who had Down syndrome, was separated from his family and mauled by a combat dog that Israeli soldiers unleashed on Bahar as he cried out, "Khalas, ya habibi," meaning enough, my dear. Mohammed Bahar's mother says he was nonverbal, and these were the only words his family had ever heard him speak. Meanwhile, the Red Cross warns hospitals in southern Gaza are at a breaking point due to the spike in patients as Israel intensifies its attacks across the territory. Only 10 of 26 UN healthcare facilities in Gaza remain operational. Israeli lawmakers overwhelmingly passed a resolution opposing Palestinian statehood. It's the first time the Knesset has passed such a resolution. Also Wednesday, United Nations chief Antonio Guterres blamed a surge in illegal Israeli settlement expansions in the occupied West Bank for scuppering a future two-state system, saying, quote, recent developments are driving a stake through the heart of any prospect for a two-state solution, unquote. Meanwhile, Palestine's UN ambassador addressed a Security Council meeting in New York Wednesday where he called for an end to the, quote, most documented genocide in history. This is Riyad Mansour.
There is a global consensus in support of the Palestinian people's right to self-determination and a two-state solution in line with UN resolutions and international law. There is more convergence on the Palestine question than on any other matter on the international agenda. And there is one isolated, fanatic government rejecting this international consensus and attacking every institution entrusted with upholding the international law-based order.
Here in Milwaukee, Ohio Senator J.D. Vance accepted the Republican vice presidential nomination Wednesday as he took to the stage on day 3 of the Republican National Convention. Vance appealed to the working class and voters in the Rust Belt swing states. Vance touted his Appalachian roots and lashed out at President Biden over his foreign policy record, including Biden's support of NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement, which Vance blamed for exporting thousands of U.S. manufacturing jobs to Mexico, as well as then-Senator Biden's role in the Iraq War, supporting it. Vance is a U.S. Marine veteran who served in Iraq. Vance also promoted tougher policies on China, which he's described as the biggest threat facing the U.S., and blamed Biden for skyrocketing inflation. Vance was introduced by his wife, Usha Vance, the daughter of Indian immigrants. Much of the RNC is centered on anti-immigrant hate speech and policies. Among the other speakers yesterday were Donald Trump Jr., Texas Governor Greg Abbott, and former Trump advisor Peter Navarro, who was released from a Miami federal prison earlier in the day before flying to Milwaukee to give his speech. Navarro served 4 months in prison for contempt of Congress after he defied a subpoena from the House Select Committee investigating the January 6th insurrection. In more news from the RNC, the peace group Code Pink is facing death threats after a Republican Congressmember accused one of its members of, quote, political violence and branded the group pro-Hamas. Code Pink says Congressmember Derek Van Orden of Wisconsin falsely accused Noor Jahama, the group's Palestine campaign coordinator, of assault after he shoved past her outside the RNC as people waited in line to be let into the security zone. Noor, who was wearing a keffiyeh at the time of the incident, was detained for 15 hours and charged with battery. Congressmember Van Orden, a former Navy SEAL, has a history of aggressive behavior, including against fellow members of Congress. Tech billionaire Elon Musk has announced plans to move the headquarters of X and SpaceX out of California and relocate to Texas over a new California state law that protects the rights of transgender students. The law, signed by California Governor Gavin Newsom this week, bans schools from forcing educators to notify parents of their child's sexual orientation, gender identity, or gender expression without the student's consent. This includes students asking to use a different name or pronoun. Musk, who has an estranged trans daughter, said on X, quote, "This is the final straw." Senior Congress members are pressing the Labor Department for data on child labor violations in federally subsidized youth work programs. This comes after alarming reports of serious abuses nationwide. At least 8 states have passed legislation to roll back child labor protections this year, including Alabama, Iowa, and West Virginia. The U.S. Department of Labor has reported an increase of 88% in child labor violations between 2019 and 2023, many cases involving migrant children. Puerto Rico has filed a lawsuit against fossil fuel giants BP, Chevron, ExxonMobil, and others, seeking at least $1 billion in compensation for their role in fueling the climate crisis. The corporations are charged with hiding evidence for decades that showed greenhouse gas pollution from fossil fuels would have catastrophic impacts on the climate. Puerto Rico's Secretary of Justice, Domingo Emanuele Hernandez, said in a statement, quote, "They did not truthfully warn Puerto Rican consumers about the consequences of using and burning fossil fuels on the island, as well as their impact on the environment. It is time for them to mitigate the damage they've caused to Puerto Rico and not let Puerto Ricans foot the bill," he said. The Wall Street Journal is under fire after it dismissed Hong Kong-based reporter Selina Chang after she was elected last month as chair of the Hong Kong Journalists Association, Hong Kong's largest media union. The Wall Street Journal claims her firing was due to restructuring. Selina Chang spoke to reporters Wednesday.
At that time, he demanded that I resign from my position on the executive committee of the Journalists Association. I told him that day that I refused, but he said the position in the Journalists Association was incompatible with my position at the Wall Street Journal. He said that employees of the Wall Street Journal should be promoting press freedom in places like Hong Kong. He said this place is not like some Western countries where press freedom has already been established.
The Wall Street Journal is owned by Rupert Murdoch, who is at the Republican National Convention this week. Colombia's government announced it's ending a ceasefire deal with the largest faction of dissident members of FARC, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia. The long-anticipated agreement had been brokered last year by the government of leftist President Gustavo Petro. This is Colombia's defense minister, Iván Velázquez.
Colombia's military forces received the order to carry out offensive operations with full capacity against these organizations, blocs, and fronts that walked away from the generous offer made by the government as it seeks peace.
A ceasefire with a smaller faction of the group will be extended for 3 months as peace negotiations continue. In Texas, anger's mounting over continued power outages more than a week after Hurricane Beryl barreled through the Houston area. Harris County officials say at least 6 heat-related deaths have been reported due to the blackouts. One woman was found dead in her home Tuesday, a day when the heat index reached 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Some 60,000 people still did not have electricity as of Wednesday. The Center for Energy Poverty and Climate released a report this week warning low-income households are particularly vulnerable to intensifying heat waves as 31 states offer no protections against summer power shutoffs when people cannot afford to pay their utility bills. Officials in Afghanistan say torrential rains in the east of Afghanistan have killed at least 47 people and injured hundreds of others in recent days. The International Rescue Committee warned the situation is only likely to get worse and called on international donors to step up, saying, quote, decades of conflict and economic crisis has meant that the country has faced setback after setback as it tries to find its feet, unquote. Wednesday marked the 10th anniversary of the police killing of Eric Garner, who died after an officer held him in a chokehold, which is a banned procedure. The now ex-NYPD officer, Daniel Pantaleo, remains a free man after a jury in the Justice Department declined to charge him for killing Garner. Yesterday, community members joined Eric Garner's mother, daughter, and cousin to march to the site of Garner's killing on a Staten Island street. Eric Garner's pleas of "I can't breathe," captured on video by a witness, became a global rallying cry. And Dr. Bernice Johnson-Reagon, civil rights activist, scholar, and musician who started the vocal ensemble Sweet Honey in the Rock and co-founded the Freedom Singers and the Harambee Singers, died Tuesday at the age of 81. In the early 1960s, Bernice Johnson-Reagon performed with the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee's musical group Freedom Singers, bringing liberation songs to marches, jails, and organizing meetings. She joined Democracy Now! In 2008 to celebrate the life and work of another civil rights musical icon, Odetta, and recalled her own musical trajectory.
Sweet Honey in the Rock, which came out of a theater workshop, was going to be a cappella, was going to do songs that came out of the struggles and the stages of life of people on a community-based level, calling people to pay attention to issues that we needed to be addressing as responsible citizens, and that singers, that artists, really had a big role to play in challenging our society and culture to transform itself and to do better. And so absolutely, the Freedom Singers and the Freedom Song in the Civil Rights Movement is formative for me, both as a singer, as a composer, and as a scholar.
Bernice Johnson-Reagon's daughter, Toshi Reagon, also an acclaimed musician, shared the news on social media Wednesday of her mother's death and included a quote from her mother, "I was here before I came, and when I die, I am not leaving." And those are some of the headlines. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency, Breaking with Convention.